What's up, guys? It's Ross from AthElite Strength and Conditioning, and this is our second episode of the AthElite podcast, talking all things AFL and coaching with our special guest in Austin Stubbs. So, a little bit of a background about Austin. So, he's been fortunate enough to work in the AFL and the AFLW and the VFLW as an assistant coach, alongside his work with multiple different clubs across different leagues in Victoria at senior footy. He also has his business in AFL HP, so feel free to check that out on social media. And I hope you guys enjoy this podcast.
So you've coached all athletes and footballers at all levels. What do you think is the main difference you found in their abilities? Is it their strength and conditioning? Is it their skills? Is it all the above? Is it game sense? What have you found, in your opinion, to be the biggest difference?
I think the strength and conditioning is definitely more advanced depending on the program that the player's in. So they get more exposure, like a TAC Cup player, for example, a NAB League player is more exposed to strength and conditioning and exercise sports scientists, etc., through the program they're in, save the money compared to like local footballers. And that's the same at the AFL compared to local. And even the VFL guys, they're generally pretty fit and stuff, but you got full-time staff at AFL clubs. So that's a significant difference in between the levels. But in regards to the acquisition of skill, I found that ground balls, clean hands, and the execution of skill. And to break that down, so at local footy and women's football at all levels and junior footy, the ball's on the ground a lot more. And that's because players aren't as good at collecting the ball off the ground and then also being able to catch the ball when the ball is being received to them. So then they don't have as much time to execute skill when they do gain possession and control it, because they've generally fumbled the ball or they can't take it cleanly. Part of it also is the sometimes skill execution, even they might have caught it well, but the execution of the skill is not that great. And I find that can be a range of technique, of like that's part of the skill, but decision making. I believe that a lot of players, compared to especially the AFL level, is their ability to scan. So make decisions according to their surroundings, and they generally have been able to look in multiple directions and scan around them before they receive the ball. So in soccer, there's a study done over in England, and it was taken for a whole season in the top competition over there in the Premier League, and the best players in the world scan 7 times every 10 seconds. And so Bappe, who doesn't play in that competition, but he actually scans 7 times every 10 seconds. So he's looking around and he looks 7 times around him before he takes possession of the ball. And that allows him to make better decisions according to his surroundings, because he knows where everything is as soon as he takes it. So he has a really clean first touch and he's got lots of time to make decisions and quick ones. So I believe that's the difference, is the ability to be clean with the ball, but then also the ability to scan their surroundings and then make decisions according to their surroundings and good execution of skill.
So with the whole scanning side of things, do you bring that down to training at a higher level? Do you think that's to do with their training, or do you think a lot of it's got to do with genetically they're able to think quicker and in that type of thing? Or do you think it's more to do with training at such a high level for whatever they do 7 times a week, 6 times a week, and playing at that high level, you're just going to get naturally better at that and think quicker? What do you think about that?
Find where people can get lost about this topic is they can't distinguish skill from ability. So skill is something that will progress over time. You'll adapt to a skill, like you'll learn how to type. You don't have that as it's not genetically given to you, or you'll learn how to kick a ball. Compared to ability is something that's genetically transferred. So for example, height, size, how strong you are, your ability to be powerful and dynamic, like good agility. That's generally a transferable through genes. Would you agree with that with your sports science degree, Ross? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic because, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Though genetics is almost like that famous word potential. potential gets thrown around a fair bit, but what is potential? What is genetics if you don't work for it, I guess? It does mean a lot in regards to working. So athlete A might have better genetics and might be a fast twitch fiber athlete compared to player B. But like you said, genetics, if player B, has the best strength and conditioning, has the best diet, he might not be able to get to player A, but generally it's the skill, like you've said, through proper coaching and proper training always beats the genetics in a game like footy anyway. It's very rare that there are a few exceptions, obviously, but it is very rare where an AFL player got to the AFL and they didn't work hard or they were lazy. So that's my perspective on it anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. So that's where I find that like the players that are the what also differentiates level is that ability to like work hard as well on those types of attributes, but also the strategy. So exactly the way they train. So yeah, conditioning and strength and conditioning, it's partially is genetically developed, but also it's working hard as well. But the quality of training changes due to better coaches, better resources, better equipment, etc. And I find that they train situations more, and that enhances the decision making. And they teach technique in the context of making a decision. So at the AFL level, you don't see many drills like lane work kicking as what you see at local level. That's constant. And yeah, you're executing technique, but you're not actually executing skill, because to execute skill, you need a component of decision making as well. And you make decisions in the game according to your surroundings. And I find that a lot of the AFL training is you're always making decisions, and you only whenever you teach technique, you always got to teach, all right, this is the decision you'd make to use this, execute this technique, to execute this skill. You need to make a decision first, then the technique. And I find that, the strategy is wasted at training at community levels because probably the right stuff isn't always trained. That's a priority. Like, lane work kicking, straight line kicking doesn't really happen that often, or 5-star handball. Like, you never follow that pattern in a game, yet there's, 80 stoppages a game at local footy, and yet you never train them. Yeah. And it's such a critical element of the game. It's a 50-50 ball. If you get better at that and you win more of those, the ball goes your way. So I find that the strategy and the training is much better at the better levels, because this has been analysed, and that generally the people that do get these jobs have studied this. So they have that research, they've done research in it, or they've been educated about these areas of the game that are really important. And that's what differentiates and distinguishes the level of ability between players, because they're educated more about strategy, but also about they've been coached to execute and perform skill much better than compared to the players at the lower level. But a part of it is also genetically as well, with ability in regard to your attributes that you develop from, such as height, weight, strength, conditioning, sprinting, endurance running, etc.
It all boils down to specificity at the end of the day, being specific to the sport and specific to your team and all that jazz. There's still, I can't believe at even local footy level how many teams prepare their players and have their preseason like they're marathon athletes rather than footballers. There has to be an element of specificity, and you've hit the nail on the head with so many stoppages, and generally at every single footy club, probably you're looking at 30% of the session, maybe some even more, is lane work kicking, and with no game kind of pressure, no specificity, because you don't get that in a game.
Yeah, Dean Laidley was really fascinating. Going back to my previous experiences, I'd worked under a few coaches that were regarded as great local football coaches or AFL players, and I really liked some of the things that those coaches did. Every coach does generally something good and something really bad. But what I liked about Dean Laidley is he introduced strategies to situations, and that he wanted the team to be really good at executing certain types of strategies in the situations that there were common encounters and that players would face during a game. Everyone would be on the same page when that happened. And I found that the players adapted into, as a team, they united much better and were able to execute the game plan because it was really clear and everyone was understood their role inside the situations that they faced, compared to other times where it's like, oh yeah, like we're executing executing technique at training, we're not executing skill. And this doesn't actually simulate the way we play. So when we get out there, we're not really familiar with what we're trying to do because we don't actually have an opportunity to familiarise ourselves with the game plan because we don't train it, if you understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So coaching footy players at all these different levels, whether it's local footy, junior footy, senior football, VFL, AFL, what have you found to be the biggest difference in the communication from coach to athlete?
Find at the community level, the coach has so many other tasks and responsibilities that they don't get the opportunity to create relationships with players, which when you give feedback, I personally find that someone will always respect feedback, whether it's positive or negative, from someone they know because they value them as a person, compared to someone you don't really know, or like, yeah, they've got responsibility because they're the leader of the club, but I have to listen to them, but I probably still don't agree with what they say, or I might not even listen to it or value it because, yeah, I don't really know what they've done. I don't really know who they are. I don't know what they stand for. And I find that that's where you get a lot more time to AFL to make those relationships. But a really good footy program will support the coach by setting up a lot of other staff around them to be able to, so they can take those responsibilities that the coach probably shouldn't have to handle. So then they can make these relationships with players. And to bring that down another level again, break it down again, is find men. They have to perform to feel valued, as women generally have to feel valued before they will perform. And when you give feedback to a bloke, like a male, they, especially as an adult, they generally, like I said, they won't value the feedback if you don't really get to know them. But you've got to make them own their own feedback. I reckon men sort of like, they just want to get things done. They want to know it all. Like a lot of blokes, when they, buy stuff, they don't read the instructions. They just want to be able to figure it out themselves. And if you can get them to own their own feedback, then it's really, really, it's a really good way to communicate and giving them a play feedback. So, for example, you could say, like asking them a question, say, hey, Ross, instead of saying, hey, Ross, need to fix your kick, mate, and just giving it to them and telling them what the cues are, they might not want that feedback. But if I said to you, hey, Ross, if I could tell you a better way to improve your kicking technique, would you be open to hearing what I've got to say? You probably feel obligated to hear it, and you're intrigued because I haven't told you what it is yet, and I'm asking you if you want to hear it. And I think people value being asked first, and I reckon that's a really good way to communicate to everyone. But I find that works really effectively with men, as women generally want to just be taught everything. They want to know all the details. And the more time you spend with women, getting to know them as well, but also just teaching them as much as you can about the game, they really value that, and they value you being open and honest and communicating with them. But the other underlying factor I find with communicating with players across all the levels is that the best coaches tend to be really direct with their feedback and honest. They don't ramble on. It's clear, precise, possibly sometimes written down, but it's always communicated face-to-face first. And the feedback is relevant to where the player's goal is. So it's goal-directed. It's not just feedback for the sake of it. They're trying to improve them towards something that's either to the benefit of the team or the benefit of the athlete.
So again, it boils down to, and similar in the strength and conditioning world, it's not necessarily what you say, it's probably how you say it. Would that be the case?
Yeah. How you say it and where it's coming from is probably where I would, put it in context too. So to break down just what I said again is make people own their own feedback if you can, by asking the question about if they want to hear it generally, and then until they value your opinion, you can probably express it more. Women probably like to feel valued before they perform, as men want to prove themselves before they perform. And then also is generally being direct, honest, giving the feedback face to face first, and it's got to be goal directed towards where they're trying to go as a person or as a team. So definitely like where it's coming from, what's the purpose to it, and how you say it, not necessarily what you say exactly.
So what does a day at an AFL club look like? What does a training day for Essendon Football Club? What do they do on a day?
So on a day back at Bombers, we would have would get into work, for example. This is for me as an analyst doing opposition analysis. So I'd get into work. Generally, I'd ask coaches if they need anything to help out other coaches and see if they need help with anything they've got on for later that day or that week, so I can help them prepare for stuff because they're really busy. And the more time that I can help them with, say, a presentation or some analysing some vision to help give players feedback, etc., coming up with strategy, whatever it is, more time they can spend with the players to create relationships because they're the ones giving the players feedback. So I would tend to be doing that, or I'd be focusing on the opposition myself and analysing individuals of other teams and how they influence the game, etc. That was specifically my role. And then after that, they would have a meeting at about 8:30. So I'd be in the club around 7:30. At 8:30, we generally have a meeting, 8:15, about training as the coaches. Then the players come in afterwards, and we go over the purpose to the session, what we're training, strength and conditioning also tell what their plans are for the session. Then we go out, you get about 20 minutes to get your taping done if you haven't done it already before training. Get everything ready, get changed, whatever you need to do. Then we train. It will be like, depending on the loads of the session, it could be a really hard session, a lighter one. So that also influences what the coaches train, as well as what this high performance staff can do as well. So it could be like, heavy loads of sprints, lots of matching, or it could be like a really light day, more technique focused, bit of craft, executing skills, not heavy loads on the legs, slow runs, etc. After that, go in, shower up, have lunch. So for example, for me, I would be inside. I'd probably be like getting all the vision of training, so the video, and I would, because it's always filmed, and I would code that. So I'd always put it into all the drills separated, and then send that out to the coaches, so the coaches can try and look at the drills and give feedback to players and analyze it themselves. Then then after that you're looking at your lunch, and then it's generally meetings in the day later on. So there's a coaches meeting every couple of days, and then there's playing meeting as well. So there might be like a stoppage meeting or a line meeting, so forwards, backs, mids, etc. And then the players will go to their meetings. They have a bit of free time. They might have half an hour free time, and then they do rotations with the sports psych or with the strength and conditioning staff, or they got their half an hour free time. Might be catch up with the coach or go and have a coffee, do whatever you want. Do a bit of extra touch, etc. And then they're finished for the day. And for example, for me in that situation, when the players are doing that, if I'm not with the coaches running a meeting, I am looking at the opposition and I'm watching games and trying to pick apart their strategy and figure out what they're trying to do, and then figuring out ways how we can exploit their strategy with our game plan ourselves.
Yes, that's in a nutshell. It's not a bad lifestyle to be an AFL player. You get looked after pretty well.
Yeah, very looked after the players. Yeah, there's a few of the boys there that almost take it for granted, but no, they're pretty good. Yeah.
So when you're working with those players, and even with other coaches working alongside so much personnel, especially before coronavirus and before the cuts and stuff to salaries and staff, how do you, because there's always going to be personality clashes and people you might get along with and you might not get along with. How do you deal with that within the players and within the staff?
Yeah, I think pretty interesting because it's a high performing environment. Things are a lot of decisions are made quickly. We've got quick turnarounds between games, a lot of pressure, media in the industry. You got to perform the whole time and be on your game. So I find that when people are under pressure, they're due to make decisions that could be like raging, or they might feel overwhelmed, so they feel a bit stressed, etc. It just brings a bit more out of people, and sometimes they don't really mean it. So you got to be real careful and be like very empathetic in the industry, I find. So getting to like really know everyone and being on the same page, like being really aligned to what the club stands for, sticking to the values, supporting each other, helping each other out, building those relationships so that when someone is stressed and that, you're able to read it because you spend a lot more time with them. So find that probably something in like hindsight with my time at the Western Bulldogs, I really valued relationships. I felt that I made an effort with a lot of people and got to know them, used to speak to them on the phone, message them, just stuff like that. Not even about footy though, just about like whatever. And then at Essendon, I probably didn't do that as well as what I would have liked in hindsight, which was it's pretty important, and found that with the coaches I did to some extent, like I work with them all the time, so that was pretty important. But some of the players, I didn't get that opportunity as much because I didn't always get to work with them. Sometimes I'd be tied up doing the opposition analysis. So I think it's just really important, like in any program, work environment you're in, just value that relationship. And then when you do give each other feedback or someone's stressing that, you're able to be like empathetic and show empathy, read what they're how they're feeling and what they're going through, and be supportive as much as you can, and they'll be supportive towards you.
Yeah, definitely some good points there. You've obviously, I've worked with any listeners out there. I've worked with Austin in the past. It was one of the coaches of mine in the past at senior football, and he's one of the better coaches I've had in his ability to create drills. So I'll be interested in knowing the answer to this. So when you're creating a drill, what's your thought process? Is it to do with, again, bring it down to specificity with the team structure and individuals, or is it, can you just have that natural ability to think on the fly and work and kind of generalize things a bit, or is it everything individualized to players, or how do you think, and what's the thought process when you're creating these footy drills?
So it's got to be purposeful to what you're trying to achieve, goal directed. There's got to be a reason for why you're doing it. Excuse me. So for example, I worked under Clinton Young at the Simon Black Academy and also Gisborne Footy Club. And when I was as a student at the Simon Black Academy, and some days when he knew I was there to develop myself as a coach more than a player, he would say, "Hey, Austin, you're running training today. It starts in 5 minutes." And I would just have to come up with a session on the fly. And I was so green. I made so many mistakes, but I learned so much from it. I find that generally when I'm training and things don't go to plan for etc., might be weather conditions or whatever, personnel, not as many blokes rock up to training, etc. at local footy, I'm always able to adapt and create drills on the fly. And but it's always, I always reassure the players it's towards a purpose. And even if the drill isn't working, you've got to be able to come up with it's an easier way to do it. Or if they're cruising, you've got to find a better way to do it as well, make it more challenging. So I think it's got to be goal directed as well. But to break down a philosophy of creating drills, I find that generally drills are repetitive and mindless activity, and you should generally try and teach situations and ideas, and then present players with problems, and then provide them guidelines to solving the problem. And the problem should always be tactical. So, for example, it's a 2-on-3. It's a 3-on-2. 2 defenders versus 3 attackers. Defenders start with the ball. Attackers, they might pass the ball just to the attackers. Attackers are suddenly got to make decisions. Now, that could be a drill. You've got to create a strategy behind it. And that's what the drill is. So you're trying to execute strategy in a situation the players will encounter. And that's how I create my drills. Is always, 1, it's purposeful. 2, it's related to the game plan. And 3, it's there's a strategy you're trying to execute within that drill. And the drills have to be also directed to the athlete's goals as well. So it's got to be it's got to be outcome focused towards what are the athletes trying to improve. For example, player A, his name might be Josh. Okay, Josh is trying to improve their ability to play one-on-one. You want to be able to figure out ways where you can improve them to when they're defending, they're out of position. All right, what's their decision making? How can you improve their techniques to be able to defend better, but also to benefit them in attack as well? So that's it's got to be related to the goals of what the athlete's trying to achieve at the end of the year. So if you're creating a drill for one individual or a few individual athletes, it's like, all right, what are they all trying to work on? How can I create this drill so it's relevant to all those players and what they're trying to work on? Hopefully they're all trying to work on the same thing. And then you can go, all right, guys, or girls, this is what we're doing today. It's relating to your development program because it's purposeful towards what we're trying to achieve for you as players individually.
Are you always thinking about all these things? Is it because there is a long process? Are you always thinking about these things, or is it just come naturally now where it is a long process, but you can process this a lot quicker than when you started?
Probably, yeah, definitely over time now I can process a lot more quickly. I found that slowly, the more footy I watch, the more I learn about good decision making and what good decisions are. I first focused on technique. I thought that was more important when I first got into coaching. So I spent my first probably few years on technique breakdown, and I learned a lot about different techniques and still know a lot about it now, and I've definitely improved that knowledge. But decision making, I've realised, is more important. So and then through Essendon with the opposition analysis, I learned all about strategy. I watched a lot of footy. Still, there's a lot of guys better than me. My manager at Essendon was phenomenal. Ben Rutten and Blake Carousel, a few of the other, James Kelly, a few of the other guys I worked off and under were terrific. Mark Harvey, they taught me a lot about strategy as well. So when I found I was working full time in footy, I'd always be thinking about strategy and how to implement that at clubs and what's the best fit for each type of team. And then also I find that when I'm watching footy, I'm always trying to pick things up, and I always analyse what teams trying to do to improve my own mind and my own skill set about game plans and things. But when I go out and service the clubs and educate coaches about game plans and etc., not only do I teach them how to implement it, I always teach them about the game plan and then create it all for them so they can present it to players through PowerPoint presentations, etc., and show examples of it with vision from AFL teams of executing certain types of strategies they might use. And I find that that's also a really good tool as well. So I'm thinking about it a lot, and I try to, in my social life, I just try to avoid footy and etc. And because it's always on my mind with my work, university, and also also any other coaching role I've got sort of outside of my business.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot to think about. Even as a player, we're processing a lot of thoughts, let alone a coach. You can times that and multiply that by 10. So there is definitely a lot to think about as a coach. But we might skip the talk about the elite level and we'll bring it back to local footy at the moment. So I want to hear from yourself. What are your top 3 local competitions in Victoria?
Yeah, I find that my time in the Eastern Football League, I was only in the Division 2 level, so they got a Premier Division now, which used to be Division 1, and that was always a really good level of footy, I felt, when I saw that. And the really rate the VAFA, the top level VAFA. I think that's a pretty good competition as well. The top Geelong League is also pretty good quality there too. I find that the EDFL is probably not quite there at those levels. I could be wrong, but yeah, definitely the top VAFA, top Eastern Football League, and the Geelong levels, got really good quality footy.
So what would be your number 1, number 2, and number 3 out of those 3 leagues? What would you say?
Eastern, VAFA, and definitely the Geelong League. But think that if the Eastern and if all those competitions combined the best players into one level, like one league, and so like they all have multiple divisions. If they just put them in like one division one, for example, and you had all the best players on the same teams, I reckon that the VAFA would probably win just because it's got the most players of all those competitions, from my understanding. So just more teams, more opportunity for better players. But definitely would say that the Eastern Football League's division, like Premier Division, is probably the best. Yeah.
And there really are some powerhouses like Vermont. I think, how many premierships have Vermont won in the last 5 or 10 years? They've been a
I
pretty
reckon
big
a
powerhouse.
couple at least. I'm mates with Harmit Singh, who's been their coach the last few years, and he's a really good operator, and he's helped set up that club to be super successful, and they've probably been the best side at local footy for the last few years across the country, and they're pretty competitive with even VFL sides. I think they've done some prackies against VFL teams, and they've been competitive against them, only lost by a couple of goals sometimes. Yeah.
Because you do get those sides. For example, Deer Park, with I think they've won the last 7. There's a 6 or 7 premierships in a row they've won. But really, if they had a statewide competition of all the premiership winners per year, it would be. I think it would be interesting to see how a Deer Park would go against a Vermont, or how a St Mary's in the Geelong Footy League would go against your Vermonts and your Deer Parks and all the premiership contenders. That would be quite interesting.
That'd be a great competition, wouldn't it? I reckon that'd be an awesome idea at local footy, like the best challenger of the premiership sides. When I was a junior at Bridgewater Footy Club, just moved from Morong down to Bridgewater down the road, and got a lot of mates there still, and they won, I think, 7 flags in a row, and then they lost the grand final the next year and ended their streak. And they were coached by a couple guys, but I think Mark Lindsay might have won 1 premiership at the end when I was come up out of the juniors, and then Andrew Collins was there for a few years, who was a former Richmond and Carlton footballer, and they were an absolute powerhouse side at local level. They could have gone to the Bendigo League and been a really good side, because the Bendigo League was it's a better quality competition than Loddon Valley. But yeah, I always felt like that was a team that probably should have challenged in a competition like that. They had so many good players. Like Andy Collins had just come out of the AFL, and he was a star in that comp, and he's in the Bendigo League now, and he's still in the top sort of 3 to 5 players. Yeah.
So bringing it back to AFL now, just before we wrap up, give us a quick premiership tip and a Brownlow tip for this year.
Yeah, premiership tips are really hard. Scoring's lower this year, clearly because of the ability of teams to be able to defend for longer with at a high level, because of the reduced time, and scoring's got less every year in the AFL for the last 3 or 4 years. It's a few hundred points less each year. So find that teams that move the ball quick generally will, and the teams that defend the best will win. I don't think a team that moves the ball slow is going to win the premiership. I think that, quick ball movement side, and also a team that defends really well will win the flag. So at this stage, Collingwood's looking like they're pretty flary with the ball at the moment. I find when they're looking pretty strong. I feel like that they'll probably go pretty far, I think, without hopefully no more injuries come through. But I reckon the Pies, just due to that philosophy of mine. For my smoky for that as well is Essendon too. And that's not being biased. So I genuinely believe that they're really capable of something this year too. Yeah.
Well, I was looking at the ladder just before, and there's still 1 game less, and definitely watching them as well. They probably did lack in the midfield, but including Dylan Shill over the past couple of seasons now, and he's really added a bit more flair in that midfield, because they did seem a little bit defensive heavy. It kind of looked like with Hurley and Hooker, there was a fair bit of a load on those 2 players, and Hooker, they've tried to go forward, and he's a fantastic player, Kale Hooker, but it's almost like that generally with clubs, the spine's the hardest to get right. I think their spine was okay especially when Joey Danaher was fit and firing, but they've always lacked in that midfield. I thought, like with depth, I think they've got. They had good quality midfielders, but they just didn't have the support if one got injured or one went down. But now it really is the engine room. Like a few weeks ago against the Pies, they really tore the Pies up in that midfield.
Yeah, they did really well in that game. I was pretty impressed. Thought that they moved the ball really quick and midfield was really good. Without giving anything away, I'm still, even though I'm not employed at the club anymore, I am still loyal to some of the people there. We've got good relationships with a few of the guys, but I definitely will say that they've got a lot of guys that can run through the midfield, which makes them a team that can have guys like with fresh legs running through the midfield. I think they've got a lot of guys that are capable of rolling through there, which gives them variety and options. So I reckon that, they might have been struggling there in recent years, especially like with the rest of the players on the spine, but they've had the improvements of, like, I reckon Jordan Ridley's season to date has been, he's one of the better defenders,
Phenomenal.
halfbacks, probably, in the AFL. He's starring. He's a
Absolutely,
great bloke.
absolutely phenomenal his season's been so far. Jordan Ridley.
Yeah, he's superb. Like Braden Ham's just improving by the game. Mason Redman, I reckon's a really good, promising player. Also, the likes of like Kyle Langford's improving, and he's starting to become like a bit of a weapon, I think, for him. So they've got some, just got some guys that are like starting to improve. Like Mitch Hibbert's been drafted out of Williamstown. Bloody great fellow, Mitch, and he was one of the best players in the VFL last year, and he came off North Melbourne's list, and he's playing for Essendon just the last 2 games. He had 19 disposals on the weekend, so he's showing like promising signs there as well. So they got a few guys that are still in the team that are pretty handy players too. So I reckon, I reckon they're a really good outfit, the Bombers. I think that a lot of people have probably underrated them coming into the season, but they're looking pretty good.
They look consistent though. That's the thing, and even as young as he is, Andy McGrath. I don't think I've seen in that draft with Hugh McGluggage is also playing some really good football at the Lions at the moment. But I don't think I've seen a number one draft pick over 3 or 4 seasons so consistent. He always plays his role. Never plays a bad guy. I have rarely seen him play a stinker. I don't think he's played one off the top of my memory. He's just super consistent. And just to have that consistency from such a young player as well would provide a lot to the side.
Yeah, I really liked Pidge. Is a great guy as well, for anyone wondering. Super, like humble person that's carrying that. But he's it's part of what makes him a good player. I reckon he's a great bloke. But his consistency at levels like been really good for a long time. He's got the ability and to play multiple positions as well. He's also a really good ball user. Doesn't waste the footy. Like I could be wrong, but I wouldn't say he's an elite kick, but I would say that he's very reliable, efficient, and consistent. He doesn't rarely butcher the footy. He makes decisions according to his capabilities, and he's capable of a lot. So, but yeah, he's a terrific player. He's having a really good year. I think that he's going to be one of the better midfielders in the competition over the next few years. He's like getting him into the midfield this year. He's really shown leaps and bounds, and definitely improvement, but I reckon he was probably already capable of that last year even.
Yeah, definitely was. Anyway, thank you very much, Austin. There you have it, guys. It's one of the masterminds working in football at the moment. Make sure to check out his business on Facebook and Instagram, AFL HP. Before we go, would you like to mention your podcast coming out soon, Off the Bench?
Yeah, so I've got a podcast with a company called Holistic Athletic Development, which we're aligning together just to produce our own podcast. It's all about footy and coaching and about how to develop yourself as not only a player but as a coach as well. So it's all footy related. So off the bench, it's with AFL HP coaching, holistic athletic development. So they'll be out in start of August. So feel free to jump on that. But this is also an awesome podcast, and I definitely recommend listening to AthElite Strength and Conditioning's podcast here with Ross. I think that he's got lots of good information to provide through his experiences, and he's doing an awesome master's degree at the moment, which is sort of really highly regarded in especially the AFL industry. So I think he's got a lot of good information to provide too across all sports.
Much appreciated, Austin. And any guys listening, feel free to subscribe and follow our accounts. It's at AthElite SC. Also, feel free to visit our websites and Google us, so AthElite Strength and Conditioning. There you have it, guys. Our very second episode of the AthElite podcast with our special guest, Austin Stubbs.